Thanks to your failure, I got to marry Harper. That's what my brother said to me, right in the main hall in front of hundreds of wedding guests. Harper, my ex-girlfriend, the one who left me because I didn't have a solid career. And now, after all these years, she shows up again, wearing a wedding dress, hand in hand with my brother, like our past never happened. I had kept quiet for years, but at that moment, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. So I spoke up and exposed everything, including the fact that Harper had cheated on me with another man while we were still together. Please stick around and let me know what you think about my choices. Hello, everyone. I'm Brian. I'm 30 years old and currently running a tech company called Novelink. We build user behavior analytics platforms for businesses. Not a glamorous field, but enough to keep me comfortable in my safe zone. I've always preferred staying behind the scenes of what I create. No media appearances, no success stories on social media, no interviews. The way I chose to stay in the background to avoid drawing attention, not to upset anyone, didn't start with work. It was rooted deep in my childhood when I was just a kid growing up in my home. Besides me, there's Luca, my older brother in my family. He's 2 years older than me. He's confident and charismatic, always at the center of every conversation. And me, I stayed in the back, listening, observing and trying my best not to be a burden. Our parents always showered him with encouragement, with proud looks full of expectations. As for me, I was only mentioned if someone asked. That was my reality for most of my life, and for a long time. I believed that sometimes in a family you must step back to keep everyone close. I thought staying quiet was the safest choice, to avoid tension, keep things from getting awkward, and ensure no one was uncomfortable because of me. But then, just over a year ago, I spoke up for the first time in my life. Not out of anger, not to start a fight, but simply because I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. And from that moment on, something began to crack. Slowly, quietly, but unmistakably. With my brother, my parents, and the fragile sense of peace I had spent my whole life trying to protect. I remember that day clearly. It was just an ordinary weekend afternoon. Not a birthday, Thanksgiving, or any special occasion. Dad called and asked me to come home for dinner. He said there was something important he needed to announce. His tone was flat and gave away nothing specific, but it was enough for me to understand. If I didn't show up, there'd be trouble. Truth be told, I didn't want to go, because I already knew precisely what those dinners felt like. The kind where every conversation circles Luca, my older brother. He's the one who makes everyone laugh, the one they ask about first, the star of all the family stories my parents love to retell. And me, I just sat there quietly, blending into the background. And if I ever got mentioned, it was usually to compare my attitude, my path, the quiet way I lived that never reasonably fit their expectations. I told Dad I couldn't make it. I said I was busy, but he wouldn't let it go. His voice turned sharp over the phone. Short, pressured. He said I had to come. It wasn't a request. It was an order. And like so many times before, I gave in to keep the peace. I nodded, got in my car, and drove back to the house I knew like the back of my hand, right down to how it felt to sit at that dinner table. Some people might wonder if I'm the CEO of a tech company, making a solid income, living an independent and stable life. Shouldn't I be the one they're proud of? But the truth is, they still don't even know what I do. I've never told them about my job, about the things I built. I've never said that my company has a few dozen employees, that I earn 7 figures a year, or that I'm behind systems they probably use without even realizing. To my parents and Luca, I'm just a quiet son who works from home, freelancing, sitting in front of a computer all day, not wearing a suit, not going into an office, not achieving anything they'd ever brag about to their relatives. And I've never bothered to correct them, not because I'm hiding anything, but deep down, I know the things I built were never what they cared about. At precisely 6 o'clock, I arrived at the house. No surprise, Luca was already there. He was always the first to show up at family gatherings, constantly trying to reinforce his image as the perfect son in our parents' eyes. The moment I stepped into the dining room, Dad looked up, And without even trying to hide his irritation, he hit me with the usual line. Lucas, here on time. You're still keeping that habit of showing up last. I swallowed hard and tried to stay calm, but I could feel the heaviness spreading through my chest. I pulled out a chair, sat down and looked straight at them. My voice was flat, steady. If there's something you need to say, just say it. I've got things to do later. I wasn't trying to start anything. I was tired of hearing the same jabs for the last 30 years. After a brief silence, Luca set his glass down and laced his fingers like he was preparing for a speech. He spoke, trying to keep his tone composed. In 2 weeks, I'm getting married. I hope you'll put the past behind you and come. I looked up and met his eyes. Calmly, I asked, have you thought this through? The room was still like someone had dimmed the lights. I glanced around the table, then continued, this time loud enough for everyone to hear. Harper was once my girlfriend. She left me because I had nothing back then. And for years after that, she dated nearly 10 different guys. I'm not so sure she's with Luca because of love. He should think long and hard before making that decision. Right after I said that, Luca shoved his chair back and his voice rose with anger. You don't get to insult Harper. He took a step toward me, pointing straight at my face. His expression read with rage. A woman as beautiful and talented as her would never go for someone like you. Broke. No future. She chose me and she was right. Are you being dumped? You deserved it. I stayed seated, looking at him. My throat tightened for a second. But this time, instead of going silent like I always did, I stood up and said, this isn't about rich or poor. This is about who's genuine and who's not fake. I stared at him for a moment, then spoke again, my voice lower but steady. You don't need to defend her just to look noble. I'm saying what I know because I was once the guy she claimed to love with all her heart, and she left me the moment someone richer came along. If you believe she loves you for you, not for your title or bank account, then you don't need to argue with me. I stopped there, sat quietly, and picked up my water glass but didn't drink. I wasn't trying to win. I just needed to say what needed to be said. Then my dad cut in, his voice cold and sharp like a blade. What would a guy glued to a computer all day know? Just shut your mouth. Next came my mom. She wasn't angry, but her tone, her eyes, somehow weighed heavier than all the yelling before. Or maybe you still have feelings for her. The second she said that, I looked at her, stunned she would even go there. And right then I knew if I said one more word, it would all spiral beyond control. So I stood up, grabbed my coat, looked at all three of them and said just one thing. I think I'll head out. And I left. Not out of anger, but because I knew this wasn't a family conversation anymore. After leaving my parents' house, I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove around downtown for a while, eventually stopping in front of an old coffee shop, a place I often went to when my mind felt too restless to return to the quiet of home. I sat in my usual spot by the window, ordered a plain Americano, no sugar, and leaned back in the chair, watching the traffic thin under the soft yellow glow of the street tilted. The quiet helped settle something inside me, but with that stillness, the memories started returning. Slowly, clearly, 8 years ago, just after I graduated. Back then, I was just a fresh grad with nothing but a degree and many unfinished dreams. I had met Harper a year before that through a mutual friend during one of those small weekend hangouts at a park or a neighborhood bakery near campus. Harper stood out. She was sharp, confident, and always knew exactly what she wanted. We started with casual conversations, and before we realized it, we were inseparable. College wasn't easy for me. I worked almost every evening to cover rent and textbooks. She wasn't in a much better financial spot, but we shared everything. From cheap dinners at our Go-Minus to sandwich shop to late-night study sessions at the library until closing. I still remember one night when we were both exhausted from exams and broke. She looked at me, reached across the table in a near-empty diner, held my hand and whispered, like she was afraid she'd forget if she didn't say it out loud. I don't need you to be rich. I need you not to give up. We'll build something together. Okay, another time. When I told her I felt lost, like all my friends already had their futures mapped out, she tilted her head, smiled softly, and said, Who needs a clear direction when I know who I want to walk with? And the night before I graduated, she told me, I don't care how much you make, as long as the person who walks through that door at the end of the day is you. I believed her. I believed every word. I never imagined she'd ever take a different path. But everything changed the night I saw her kiss another man. It all shattered, like cracked glass that had been holding together too long, just waiting for one slight tap to break apart completely. That night, I wanted to surprise her. After a late shift at work, I stopped by her favorite place and picked up a box of lasagna, her comfort food, especially when stressed. I drove to her apartment unannounced, thinking I'd knock on the door, hold up the food, and see her childlike, surprised smile. We'd have a late dinner, chat about nothing and everything, and she dressed her head on my shoulder like always. But no, just as I turned onto her street, I saw her standing near the gate of her building. She was talking to a man older than me. A sleek black sedan was parked next to them, the kind of car where the maintenance bill could swallow my entire year's salary back then. I stopped my car mid-minus street. Seconds later, I saw Harper wrap her arm around his shoulder, and they kissed. A natural, familiar kiss. The kind that doesn't just happen once. I didn't get out, didn't call her name. I just sat there, holding the still warm food, feeling completely hollow. I don't even remember how I turned the car around. After the man drove off, I stepped out. I stood in front of her. She froze when she saw me, took a step back in shock. When I told her I had seen everything, she didn't deny it. She looked me in the eye and admitted it, said she'd been seeing someone else. And just before it all ended, she told me something I know I'll never forget. We should stop. I don't hate you, but I can't sacrifice my future to be with someone who still has to skip meals to pay rent. I went numb. I didn't say another word. Not because I had nothing to say, but because deep down, I knew she was right. Back then, I had only been working for 3 months. My first job, barely making $3,000 a month, just enough to rent or minus down apartment on the city's outskirts and get by on a tight budget. I used to believe that if two people loved each other enough, they could get through anything together. But Harper didn't see it that way, and I couldn't blame her. It was that moment I started to understand. Some people are born to choose a different road, and sometimes you're just a brief stop along the journey they were always meant to leave behind. After Harper left, I tried to act fine for the first 3 weeks. I showed up to work on time, still smiled, made small talk, and lived as if it was just a passing rain shower. That would soon clear. But by week 4, I finally broke. Not in a dramatic crashing minus down kind of way. Hollow kind of collapse. That's when Michael, my best friend since college, showed up, right on time like he could feel I was sinking. I still remember that night. I was curled up on the balcony, half a beer in hand. Michael stood next to me, didn't say much, didn't ask how I was. He just looked at me and dropped this blunt line. You want her back. Want to be remembered your whole life as the guy who got dumped because he had nothing to offer. That hit straight at whatever pride I had left. But instead of getting mad, I sat up, and that was when I started again. In the days that followed, I took on to jobs. By day, I worked as a tech support guy at a mid-minus level software firm. By night, I freelanced writing code, building databases, taking on anything legal. That paid on time. That became my rhythm. 3 years later, I had saved up a decent amount. I don't remember the exact moment and number, but I remember staring at my bank account one evening and seeing it just shy of $200,000. I sat there, staring at the screen, like I was reading someone else's story. And then, it was Michael, the same guy who pulled me out of that pit, was the one who pushed me forward once more. I remember it vividly. The same coffee shop we always went to, light music in the background, the smell of freshly brewed espresso in the air. He leaned in, set his cup down, looked me in the eye and said, what you're building for others can make them millions. So why can't you be the one making it? That question dug deep. I couldn't sleep before the AM. For days, thinking about it repeatedly. 2 weeks later, I quit my job. I poured everything I had into starting Novelink. My company, my risk, my leap. I added a small bank loan with a low interest rate. And it began just like that. The first year was brutal. Clients were scarce. Cash flow was a constant red alert. There were nights we thought we wouldn't make it, and days we nearly shut down because we couldn't keep up with costs. But we pushed through. Every line of code was written with the belief that someone somewhere would need what we were building. By year 2, things started looking up. We had a few steady clients, just enough to keep the team running. We were not thriving, but we were no longer drowning in debt. Then came the AI boom, when the world shifted and started looking for more innovative ways to work with data. Novelink was already prepared. We didn't miss that wave. We landed our most significant contract yet. The systems we built became strategic solutions for dozens of companies. Suddenly, people were talking about Novelink. Tech blogs wrote features. Firms analyzed our business model. Investors began to knock on our door. There was just one thing they couldn't figure out. Across every datasheet, company profile, or feature article, the name of Novelink's founder was always left blank. Who's the person behind Novelink? That question showed up in headlines more times than I could count. But I stayed silent. Not because I wanted to be mysterious, but because I knew some things only belong in the spotlight when the time is truly right. During all the years I poured my life into building Novelink, my parents never once asked if I was doing okay. To them, Luca was the only one worth being proud of. Every major holiday, I still showed up. Birthdays, Christmas, Thanksgiving. I'd arrive on time, bring gifts like everyone else, smile, and make polite small talk. Then I'd quietly find a corner in that crowded house, pour myself a drink, and enjoy the gathering in my way. Unnoticed, unbothered, and honestly, unmissed. There were times I wanted to tell them. Wanted to say that the son they always saw glued to a laptop, the one they joked about, brushed off, never really asked about, that son was running a system relied on by dozens of companies, that he was building something real. But every time that thought started to rise, I'd remember something Michael once said. It was the same half-minus joking tone he always used. But that time, he looked at me more seriously than usual. Don't ever let people know you're successful and loaded, especially the ones who never believed in you. Trouble finds you faster than you think. Trust me. So I stopped trying to prove anything. I kept playing the part. The quiet youngest son, always buried in his laptop, doing God knows what. No one asked. No one cared to know. And that was fine. As for Harper, she faded into the background over time, like a memory washed away by meetings, deadlines, and endless lines of code. I didn't force myself to forget her. I didn't cling to anything, either. Life was to hold for the things that once hurt to find a place. I used to think we'd never cross paths again. Maybe some people just become part of the past and stay there. But fate doesn't always let you forget that easily. I saw her again at my mother's birthday party 2 years ago. That day was a cozy family gathering. Traditional, just like my mom always liked. And it was also the first time Luca brought Harper home as his girlfriend. She walked in wearing a tight red dress, soft curls in her hair, and flawless makeup that I didn't even recognize for a split second. I didn't call her out, didn't say a word. I stood there, a glass of wine in hand, watching from a distance. After a few the minus stop introductions from Luca, his usual style, he turned toward me and said, "This is my younger brother, always glued to a computer screen. Still not sure if he knows where he's going in life." Harper heard that and smiled. A tilted, subtle smile, just enough to drip with condescension. Then she turned to Luca and said, light and playful like she was making a harmless joke, "I know. I once considered getting to know him. But that was all." Right then, I saw it. There was a slight pause on Luca's face, like something clicked and froze for half a second. But Harper tilted her head, gave a soft little laugh, and followed up with, "You're the one I truly love." And just like that, he smiled again. Like the moment before was just a throwaway line from a bad sitcom. After that introduction, Luca walked Harper around the room, introducing her to everyone. glasses clinking, laughter trailing behind. Toward the end of the evening, when the crowd had thinned out and conversations had faded into background noise, Harper walked over to where I was standing. Still, with that polite party smile on her lips, something in her eyes had sharpened. She stood next to me, took a slow sip of wine, then leaned in slightly and said quietly, "All these years, and you're still the same. How's still that forgettable silhouette? Nothing special. No future. Approves I made the right choice when I left." She didn't speak loudly, but it was loud enough to cut through the soft background music, loud enough to pierce the silence between the people who should have been strangers by now. While I was still lost in old memories, a server gently approached and told me the cafe was closing soon. I nodded, thanked him, paid the bill, and entered the crisp night air. The city felt quieter than usual, and my mind kept spinning with thoughts I couldn't quite put into words. That night, I drove home in silence. No music, no clear thoughts. Just one question looping over and over in my head. Should I go to Luca's wedding? Part of me wanted to say no. After everything that had happened, the insults, the looks, the way they all made me feel so small. I had no reason to show up on their big day. But then I decided I would go. Because like it or not, he was still my brother. And sometimes, even when the family doesn't deserve it, you show up anyway. Not for them, but for the version of yourself that still chooses dignity over bitterness. What I didn't expect, though, was that this one seemingly right decision would hand them the perfect opportunity to turn me into a punchline at their celebration. 2 weeks later, I attended the wedding after getting the venue details from my mother. It was a luxury event space in the city's heart. Just stepping into the lobby made it clear how much they'd spent to make this day perfect. I arrived 30 minutes early. It was Luca's big day after all. The moment I stepped through the doors, my father's eyes found me. He scanned me from head to toe, then said with that all too familiar, cutting tone, "I honestly didn't think you'd show. This place is for people who know how to dress and behave appropriately." Then lowering his voice, glancing discreetly around the room, he added, "Luca's bosses and business partners are here. Try not to embarrass him." I nodded, said nothing, and walked deeper into the venue. Luca and Harper were near the reception area. The moment they saw me, they both smiled. They walked over and offered polite, well-rehearsed greetings. "You made it. Thanks for coming. Hope you enjoy the night." Just as they turned to leave, Luca leaned in close, eyes glinting with that familiar half-joking, half-mocking expression. "There's a little surprise coming your way later." I didn't respond. I just smiled slightly, poured myself a drink from the bar, and waited. About 30 minutes later, the ceremony officially began. Luca and Harper took the stage together, the soft sound of applause filling the room. They looked perfect, like a couple plucked from the pages of a wedding magazine. After a few words of thanks to the guests, Luca suddenly shifted his tone. He looked straight at me. "And now," he said, "I'd like to invite my younger brother, Brian, to join us on stage and share in our joy." The applause that followed was polite and controlled. After a brief hesitation, I stepped forward, keeping my expression calm, revealing nothing of my feelings. As soon as I reached him, Luca leaned toward the mic, his smile wide and gleaming. "Ladies and gentlemen, the person I owe the most enormous thank you to tonight. It is my brother Brian, because if it weren't for him, I wouldn't have Harper." Laughter rippled through the room, followed by a few scattered claps. The mood stayed warm and light. To most, it probably sounded like I had introduced them, or maybe stepped aside out of brotherly support. But Luca wasn't done. He turned to me, placing a hand on my shoulder like we were close, and added, this time louder, clearer, and deliberately pointed, "Brian, it's because of your failure that I got to marry Harper." Then he turned back to the crowd. "Harper and Brian had a thing for a while back in the day. But Brian lacked ambition and didn't know what he wanted in life. And that gave me the chance to step into her heart." This time the applause was louder. Some guests nodded, smiled, as if they just heard a touching story about fate and choices. No one thought anything of it, because to them, I was nothing more than a side character. in the beautiful love story of Luca and Harper. But before Luca could continue, a man stood up from one of the front tables near the stage. He wore a gray suit, moved with calm authority, and spoke with a deep, steady voice. Luca, that was out of line. The light applause stopped. Luca froze. I turned to get a better look at the man. And the moment our eyes met, I recognized him immediately. It was Mr. Jonathan Blake, CEO of Vertex Financial Group. They had recently deployed Novelink's AI tool to analyze customer behavior online. I didn't know until that moment that he was also Luca's direct superior. After that heavy sentence, Mr. Blake walked toward me and extended his hand. His voice was low and calm, but carried enough weight that the entire room seemed to fall silent to listen. Hello, Brian, the founder of Novelink. I shook his hand, still stunned, not yet able to say anything. When he picked up the mic and turned to face the crowd, ladies and gentlemen, standing before you is the founder of Novelink, one of the fastest growing tech companies. In the last 2 years, twice named among the top 10 most promising startups in the industry. A ripple of murmurs spread across the hall. Heads turned. People began to look at me differently, like they were suddenly putting the pieces together. Then Mr. Blake turned to me and asked gently, "Would you like to say something?" I nodded. I didn't know exactly what I was going to say, but I knew deep in my chest that if ever there was a time to speak, it was now. He handed me the mic. I took it and drew a slow, steady breath. I've never been one for public speaking, but this time, I had something real to say, and it had waited long enough. Ladies and gentlemen, I began. Everything my brother said about me is true, but it's not the whole truth. I paused, let my eyes move slowly across the room, then continued. 7 years ago, Harper didn't just walk away from me because I didn't have a career. She cheated on me with another man while we were still together, and I saw it with my own eyes, right outside her apartment door. The night I showed up to surprise her, the room went still. Harper froze. Not a single sound moved through the crowd. I turned to Luca, not with anger, but with the quiet, steady look of someone who had long since let go of needing to be understood. Lowering the mic just slightly, I looked back out at the room. My voice was calm. Even I'm not angry today. I want to say thank you, especially to my sister minus in Minas Law Harper. I turned to face her. No bitterness in my eyes. No accusations left. It's just a truth I needed to finish. If it weren't for you, I might still be clinging to a cheap kind of love, the kind that takes more than it gives, and I wouldn't have become the founder of Novelink. Your rejection, your contempt back then, that was the push I didn't know I needed. With that, I handed the mic back to Mr. Blake, gave him a respectful nod, and stepped down from the stage. I walked straight out the door, never looking back, because everything that needed to be said, I had already said. I went straight back to my apartment after that. I didn't feel happy exactly, but at least the weight in my chest had lifted a little. The moment I opened the door and stepped inside, coat still on, my phone rang. The screen lit up with a name. Mr. Blake. I picked up. His voice was as steady as ever, but there was a careful tone beneath it this time. He asked how I wanted to handle things with Luca, since after all, Luca was one of his direct reports. He said he didn't want a personal matter to interfere with business, especially when Novelink had become one of their key strategic partners. I stayed silent for a few seconds, then replied clearly, "This is a family matter. I don't want to drag it into work. Please handle it however you see fit." There was a pause on the line. I heard him inhale then slowly exhale, and then he said something I hadn't expected. "You know, the wedding's been called off." I froze, still standing by the door, hand on the lock. "Right after you left," he continued. "Harper walked out too. No one could stop her. She said she couldn't go through with it after what happened. She left Luca standing there alone. I didn't say anything, not because I felt triumphant, not because I wanted revenge, but because in that moment I felt nothing in particular. No sadness, no anger, no satisfaction, Just a long, quiet stillness. The kind that settles in when something ends, and you're finally ready to let it go. The next morning, around 10 o'clock, I wrapped up a product development meeting and reached for my second cup of coffee when my assistant knocked on the door. She said to older people who said they were my parents, "We're waiting in the lobby." I paused for a moment, not out of shock, but I hadn't expected they'd come to my office. They sat on the long couch near the reception area. When I walked downstairs, I invited them into a small meeting room, closed the door behind us, and sat across from them. My father spoke first. No sugarcoating, no dramatic build-up, just a simple, direct confession. I was wrong always to favor Luca. I thought he was the capable one worth investing in. But the son I never placed my hopes on turned out to be the one who made me rethink everything. My mother, sitting quietly beside him, added her voice in steady, "I regret not standing up for you during the times I should have. I stayed silent too long." After that moment of honesty, I set my coffee down, leaned back in the chair, and answered slowly, "If I weren't the founder of Novelink, would you still be here? Would you still be apologizing? Let's be honest with each other." For once, the room went quiet. A few moments passed before my father spoke again. His voice was low but steady, with no attempt to dodge the question. "We didn't come here to ask you for money. We don't want anything from you. It's just that, after everything, I finally see how capable my son is. If you're free, come home for dinner this weekend. That's all. We won't ask for a single cent." With that, they left. I stayed in the chair, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. I thought about what he said, not to test whether he meant it or not, but to ask myself, what is it that makes me feel lighter today? His apology, or the simple truth that I don't need it anymore? Later that same day, I received an E-mail from Mr. Blake. Short, to the point. That is exactly his style. It read, "Brilliant. I've decided to terminate Luca's employment immediately. I can't allow his lack of personal control to affect the company's reputation or a partnership with Novelink. Rest assured, this decision has no bearing on Novelink." I read it twice, not out of disbelief, just to let it settle. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel pity. All I felt was the simple, clear thought: Luca brought this on himself. Right after, my assistant came back holding an iPad. "There's a video being shared on Twitter and Reddit," she said. "You might want to see it." I hit play. It was footage from the wedding stage last night. Luca's speech. My response. In the moment, Mr. Blake stepped out and revealed who I was. The comments below were flooding in outrage, disbelief, judgment. Humiliating your brother at your wedding, only to get exposed by your boss. Unreal. Harper is a textbook case of betting on the wrong horse. This whole thing feels like a Netflix drama. Then came the press, tech blogs, social media outlets. Even lifestyle magazines picked it up. No one took Luca's side. No one defended Harper. Words like opportunist, shallow, and disrespectful floated across headlines and comment sections. I turned off the video, set the iPad down, and leaned back in my chair. Still no satisfaction. There is no bitterness either. Just a quiet awareness. Some lessons, if you refuse to learn them with reason, will eventually come for you. I thought that after the wedding, Harper would disappear for good, but I was wrong. 3 months later, on a late afternoon after work, my phone buzzed with a short message. "Can I see you?" It was from Harper. We met at a familiar coffee shop we used to visit back then. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting quietly. I sat across from her. She didn't ask how she'd been. I didn't try to act cold either. We just sat there, two cooling cups of coffee between us, and a silence so wide, we didn't know where to begin. After a while, she lifted her gaze. Her eyes no longer held the confidence they once had. Then in a voice soft but clear, she said, "I still love you." I looked at her, held that moment for a long, steady beat, then smiled gently. "I think you're mistaken. I said, voice even. The person you loved was the version of me who was helpless, the one who saw you as his entire world. She didn't respond. She just lowered her head, shoulders trembling slightly, as if holding back something, even she couldn't quite name. A few minutes passed. Then I stood up, placed enough cash on the table for both coffees, and walked out. As for Luca, my older brother, after he was fired, I heard he ran there, that he'd applied to a few companies, but every application was rejected. Not because he lacked the skills, but because the name Luca had become inseparable from that viral video. The backlash hadn't faded, and once the internet labels you as the guy who humiliated his brother at his wedding, second chances don't come easy. 6 months after that night, my phone rang on a quiet weekend afternoon. It was Luca. It was the first call since everything had fallen apart. I hesitated, then picked up. He only said one thing. I want to see you, if you're okay with it. An hour later, we met at a small coffee shop near our old college apartment complex, a place we'd gone to a few times when we were just broke students. Luca got there first. He was hunched lightly near the window, hands clasped, eyes avoiding mine when I walked in. No small talk. There are no lengthy explanations. After a pause, he spoke, his voice lower, rougher than I remembered. I was wrong. I knew that now, and I should have known it long ago. I've lost almost everything. My name, my job, Harper. I'm not here to ask for any of it back. I want one chance. A job. Any position you think I'm fit for. I didn't answer right away. Honestly, for most of that meeting, I just watched him. Listened. Took in every word. Every movement. Every glance. I was trying to understand whether what I was seeing was genuine remorse, or just another move from someone desperate to climb out of a hole. Eventually, I nodded, not because I had fully forgiven him, but because if I was strong enough to make it through everything that happened, then I was strong enough not to carry bitterness forever. So I looked him in the eye and said clearly, all right, you'll start at the bottom. No special treatment. No title. Just work. Luca didn't say a word. He just nodded. And for the first time in a very, very long while, there was no arrogance in his eyes. Only a man trying honestly to learn what it means to begin again. It's been a year since everything shattered, like a mirror thrown to the floor. I still drop by my parents' house now and then. Not often, but enough for them to know I'm still here, still their son. Even if the distance between us now isn't measured in words, but in the quiet boundaries of caution and clarity. They no longer compare me to Luca. No more. When will you settle down like your brother? No more. Luca's got more ambition than you. Now they tell the neighbors that their youngest son is the founder of Novelink, that he's always busy, but he still remembers home. And every time they say that, I ask them gently to stop. Not because I don't appreciate it, but because I know pride built on guilt is fragile. I don't need them to brag about who I am. I need them to see me clearly, even if I were no one at all. As for Luca, he's still working at the lowest position in the company. Customer service, $45,000 a year. There is no bold title on his business card. No private office. No personal assistant. He shows up on time. He gets his work done. Not a single complaint. Sometimes, I catch him in the hallway, paper cup in hand, eyes on his phone like any other employee. And through all of it, I've come to understand. Forgiveness isn't about erasing the past. It's not about someone paying the full price before you let them back in. Forgiveness is when you can look back, without your chest tightening. When you can smile not because you've won, but because you no longer let what they did define who you are. And maybe growing up isn't about rising above others, but about standing steady enough that you no longer need to. And before I bring this story to a close, I want to ask you, those of you who've stayed with me through every word, every turn, was I wrong for choosing to speak the truth at the wedding? A moment that was supposed to be filled only with laughter and well wishes. Was I wrong for still giving my brother a second chance, even after he used the most important day of his life to humiliate me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop your perspective in the comments below this story. And if something in it struck a chord with you, don't forget to hit subscribe, give it a like, and share it with others. Maybe someone out there needs to hear this today. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you again in the following story.